Ciao, jewelry makers. I'm Joey Balistreri, and today on my work table, I have some very masculine elements because I am working on gifts for men and in particular bracelets for men. Men can be really challenging to make things for and to buy things for, and so I've sort of challenged myself to create some really masculine but elegant and lovely bracelets to give as gifts for the men in our lives. So I have done a few samples, and I'll start with the first one that I did, which included some 10 millimeter red tiger's eye and some lava hishi beads, and then these dark agate stones, and it is strung on black leather. And I used a really heavy metal, dark metal button, and I just did some simple knots at the end so that it's adjustable. So, that is one of the challenges with making men's jewelry is the closures. You don't want things that are feminine. And the other thing that I find challenging with men's jewelry is the spacers between the beads. Because if you add in those normal metal elements that we do, the little gold or silver spacers, often it loses the masculine and the heavy looking feel that men like to wear and that goes with their wardrobes. So my solution for that was to you do some leather knots, just overhand knots in between some of the beads, creating almost components separated by just a leather knot. So that was my first one. My second one, I switched to this distressed denim leather, and I found a button that looks like it could be on a men's plaid shirt. And, I sort of like that. And I did the little crisscross detail and also did this one adjustable and did some very free form organic knots, not, beautiful, perfect knots. And this one has a Z bead in the middle, flanked by those Hishi beads and then the agate beads. And again, you can see the spacers that I created by just the overhand knots. But I was asking opinions of some guys that I know about the closure, and some of them felt like buttons for a closure could still be a little bit too feminine for them. So I did a third sample. I had in my stash a really large Z bead, and I flanked it with two of those 10 millimeter tiger eye, and then just created a pattern with those dark agate beads, and just a little bit of a Hishi bead, the lava Hishi beads for the spacer. And I switched my closure on this one to a black enamel lobster claw and just made a loop and just did a really simple barrel knot on each one. It's very dark, can you see? So I'm going to do a fourth one with you guys. And these are going to go for gifts for some teenage boys. And so we'll see how it goes. But, I've always found I'm very feminine and I love pink. And I've always found it challenging to make jewelry and gifts for the guys in my life and also even to go buy it. So hopefully this will give you all some ideas if you have some gifts to make for the guys in your life. So what I have here in my dish is a little section of 1 millimeter black leather, and that's going to be my stringing material. And I have some of these black lava hishi beads and another one of those black enamel lobster claw clasps. Actually, we're going to start with that. And then in my other little basket bowl, I have some more of those 10 millimeter tiger eye, one more of these Z beads left from my stash, and some of these dark agate beads. I think these are 8 millimeter, they might be 6, but anyway, I'm going to create a little pattern with that. And so on a men's bracelet, especially since this one really will not be adjustable, I generally make them about 8 inches. That is kind of an average size for men's bracelets. And if you want to change this to, have an adjustable clasp on it, you certainly can, which with this technique on the end, you can actually do double loops, but I think I'm going to do this one at around 8 inches and do my closure the way that I did on this sample. So that is my plan. So I am going to give myself extra leather because I'm going to do barrel knots, and that takes up a little bit of space on the leather. So I don't mind losing a little bit if I have to trim it away. So I'm going to start by putting my 1mm leather cord right through the lobster clasp. And I want to give myself a nice long tail because that will help not to struggle with the barrel knot. And then I'm just going to use my finger and wrap around and then go back and then do my wraps from there. So you can do a barrel knot with your finger like this. I do it really simply, or a straw works really well, or a tube bead. I'm not the best at making these. I don't do a lot of this kind of jewelry, so this whole project is really a challenge for me. And I picked up a little tool at the Orlando Bead Show, which I may try on the other end. But that's all I do is kind of hold on to it and then feed that tail or the end of my leather. And you can, since you're holding on to a lot at one time, you can use your pliers almost like tweezers to get a hold of things. So I just want that tail to go through all of the loops, and it does not want to cooperate. There, I got it. And then this leather has some kind of a coating on it, and it does not really want to cooperate with me. It's almost like it has a gloss over the leather, but I'm just going to gently tug, and before I tighten down, just make sure all of my loops are in place. And I know that my fingers are in the way, and I know that it's really difficult to see, but I can't move my fingers to show you what I'm doing until I have tightened it down. And I have a little bit more tightening to do because I just wrapped my leather around my fingers. So I'm just tugging on the clasp and the tail and the core wire just to move everything into position. And before I tighten, I do want to check and make sure that my coils have stayed where I want them. And before I tighten also, I'll just show you this. I'll get my fingers out of the way in a moment. Let me just continue to tug and tighten. But I don't want to tighten my barrel knots so much that my lobster claw clasp is too tight and does not move freely. So I want that loop to have a little bit of space. So let me just continue to, oops, I just pulled it way too tight. This leather has an odd coating on it. I think I got it from Amazon. I normally place my leather orders from an Etsy shop called Leather Cord USA, and they have really great quality. And this is okay. It's just a little bit different. It has some kind of a finish over the leather. And so when I get my knot just the way that I want it, and my loop here is not too tight, I will trim away that tail, and I always put a little bit of GS Hypo Cement on my knots just to add a little extra security. Get it nice and tight. Yeah, the coating on this is really making it difficult to even tighten it down the way that I want it. I get it in position and then it slides out, but that's okay. I'll get it a pretty little knot. So I'm going to trim away this tail and add a little bit of GS Hypo Cement to the end of that knot for extra security. It dries clear. I'm going to do a little bit here too. You have to get this little pin back inside the GS Hypo Cement pretty quickly before you can keep working because it keeps coming out. And then the more it comes out, the more you can't see where the pen goes. It's a good glue, but that's the challenge. So I'm just going to let that GS Hypo cement set up a little bit, and then I'm going to string a pattern with my beads here, and I will be back and show you what I have come up with for a pattern. My GS Hypo cement is pretty well dry, at least to the touch, so I can start stringing. And so this is the pattern that I worked out with my Z bead in the middle, flanked by 3 tiger's eyes and the red tiger's eye, and I'm using a few of those lava hishi beads as my spacer, so I can just start on one end and string this up. And I will tell you, on my other sample bracelets that I did, I had no problem getting my leather through my gemstone beads, but I did have a little issue with the lava beads, and I was using some glass beads on this one. And so it is handy to have, let me set this down. It is handy to have a little bead reamer on hand. And I got this little set that has all the sizes of bead reamers depending on the beads that you're you're working with. And so you just have to be careful not to break your beads because you're not doing it underwater. I have a battery operated one as well, but I keep this little bead reamer just on the side of my table. So when I'm doing a stringing project like this and I need it to go on something that's 1 millimeter leather, I may come across where I have to ream some of my beads, which I did on the other sample bracelets that I made. So let me see how this goes. Yeah, this one might need a little encouragement to go on the leather. So it's really just that simple. Just, it's kind of like a nail file. It's kind of got that sandpaper grittiness, and just make that hole. Now on this bracelet, the leather is going to be completely covered by my beads. It's not going to have any spaces where it's shown. It still needs a little bit of encouragement. I'm also going to make the end of my leather a little bit flatter. Just pinch it with my pliers. I know these go on because I did, yeah, there we go. I know they go on because I did my other bracelets with these, but you know, if you don't have a smooth sliding bead, you can damage your leather all the way down. So even though this leather is going to be completely covered with beads because I'm stringing the whole thing and it will be inside the beads, I still don't want to damage it or scrape it with my beads. So let me string this little pattern that I've created, and I'll be back and show you how we finish this off. So my pattern is strung, and I love the way it looks. I love the way it feels, and I'm going to create a reasonable sized loop at this end. And let me try this little tool that I picked up at the Orlando Bead Show and see how we go with that. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm right-handed, so these need to lay in the channel. There's a little channel in this tool. And so that's why I tend to use my finger. I haven't practiced with this tool. I just got it a month or two ago, and I haven't really practiced with it, but I'll give it a try. It is supposed to make barrel knots easier. So I'm going to lay both both leather ends of my cord in that channel and just take that tail and wrap it. So when you do a barrel knot, you want to wrap backwards, not forwards. And with this tool, I don't know if I'm going to be at the right space that I need for my beads. Let me see if I will be able to tighten it up. But let's see. I'm so used to doing it around my finger that this tool is probably going to be more difficult for me then making it easier, but I'm going to give it a go. Switch hands here. I'm doing extra coils just because I can. I have this amount of leather left over. I gave myself some extra space here. And so then with this tool, you get a hold of it with my thumb, the leather cord can go right through that channel. If you can see, I know my hand is in the way, but it can go right through the channel and come out the other end. And so then you can, let's see, do I want it to be, yes, right there. Then you can remove the tool and begin that tightening process. So let's see, maybe this. So I'm going to just hold on to my loops, my coil that I made, keep them in a row. Sometimes when I make these, I'll get my coils out of alignment and just work it down, tighten it. So the tool works pretty well. It didn't get me too far away from my beads. That worked pretty well. A straw works as well. You know, it's just something you have to practice. And I don't do a lot of these, so those of you that are really good at making barrel knots are probably cringing, but for my purposes, for my project, I'm pretty happy with it. And I am a little bit struggling with the coating on this leather cord, but that turned out really pretty. And so same thing we do when we're stringing on other material. I don't want my bracelet to be too rigid. I want it to have movement. I don't want the beads to be really tight up against each other. So before I finish this off and do my final tightening, I just want to make sure that it's not too rigid. And I'm really happy with that. So let's do the same thing on this end. Going to cut away that tail and come in with a little bit of GS Hypo Cement. So I had to pause the video because I was a little bit fascinated with this tool. I purchased this at the Orlando Bead Show a couple of months ago, and it came like this with a sample barrel knot on it. And I really hadn't had a chance to really practice with it or work with it. And I was a little bit fascinated with it. So I paused the camera and I made another bracelet really quickly just so that I could practice with that tool. And I really like it. I discovered that I was able to get a lot more coils on my barrel knot without having the trouble of holding everything on. And so, I mean, a tube bead does work, but you don't have as much space to feed the tail back through as you do when you have a channel. So I just found it really easy, and so I really enjoyed that. And then when I make jewelry gifts, for women, I tend to put my gifts in a lovely organza bag. But for men, it feels like a pouch that is gray velvet and a little bit thicker would just make a nice presentation for masculine jewelry. So that's how I am going to present these gifts and probably put it in a black box as well. So I really hope that the discussion on the elements for more masculine jewelry was helpful to all of you, and that the project was easy and you enjoyed it, and that you'll be inspired to do something for the men in your lives. And so I really hope that you're all having fun on your beading mats, and I thank you for watching today. Ciao, jewelry makers.